Hello, welcome everybody. We're just having people join us, so we'll wait a few minutes. We've had a lot of interest, so expecting quite a few people. Just need a couple of minutes for people to be able to log in, and then we'll get started. Great. Okay, well, we'll make a start. So welcome to our second webinar in a series that we started last year, which is about presenting and discussing a little bit some of the practical lessons learned in managing coexistence and human-wildlife conflict. And so this is actually a collaborative project between the IUCN Specialist Group on Human-Wildlife Conflict and the FAO of the UN. And so last year we started to embark on this series of case studies. And what we wanted to do with this was to highlight some really good work from around the world that shows what can be done. So really kind of show examples of where managing human-wildlife coexistence or conflict, whatever state it is in, is going quite well. It's not easy, but there is good progress. And to look at those positive case studies and stories, but go a little bit beyond just presenting what they're doing, but actually dig into why is it working? What can we learn from these particular examples that can be shareable and valuable elsewhere? And so after we decided to turn this also into a series of webinars. We had one last year, which some of you were able to join, that focused on looking at engagement and ethics in working with communities. And today we are looking specifically at community-led management of human-wildlife conflict. And there's some wonderful examples from around the world. We're featuring 3 of those today. So just as a kind of bigger picture of the purpose of this, in the IUCN Specialist Group, we've been developing guidelines, IUCN guidelines on human-wildlife conflict, which are kind of a very large practical how-to state-of-the-knowledge document, which is nearing completion. We're hoping to have it finished by, we will have it finished by the conference that we're running next year in March. And these case studies actually align with those guidelines, they complement them. So these are kind of worked examples of some of the principles that will come out in the guidelines. And so we had the honor to work with FAO on this to produce these very comprehensive, nicely presented examples, which are all digitally available. So what you will see today, you can go and look at the documents as well. And the links for those are appearing in the chat right now. So I think we can dive right in. The way this is going to work, if I could have the next slide with the agenda, please.
Just a second.
That works. Great. Thank you, Christina. So joining me today is, well, first of all, I need to introduce Christina Rodina from the FAO, who you just heard briefly, who will speak at the end and summarize. And we've been together with James Stevens, the program officer of the specialist group, compiling this together with our members and a number of other people from around the world who you'll hear from today as well. So we will go into 3 brief presentations, sort of 7 to 10 minutes each, where you'll hear about 3 of these case studies, and each of these have the common theme of how did they manage to engage with and work with the community and have the community lead the process and really own the entire aim of working towards coexistence. The audience, please feel free to ask questions or even add comments at any time. You can do that in the chat, and you can also do that using the Q&A buttons at the bottom, if you can see those. And we will keep an eye on those. And we'll take questions kind of after talks, but also towards the end, where several more panel members from the specialist group will join us to have a bit more of a discussion. But I'll come to how that works after the talks. But please do, we want to hear your insights, also comments and questions. Do throw them into the chat and the Q&A. Okay, so I think we'll get started. So we have speakers with us today. First of all, we have Lovemore Sibanda, who has been working for many, many years in the Trans-Kalahari Predator Program, and has really extensive experience of working on the ground through and with the community, and done some fantastic work on reducing livestock predation and coexistence and creating coexistence. We'll hear from Lovemore first, followed by Mayukh Chatterjee, who was for a long time head of human wildlife conflict in WildCRU in India, is now with Chester Zoo and has worked extensively throughout India and beyond with tigers, elephants, leopards, many species, and human wildlife conflict. We'll hear a very nice example about community-led primary response. And then we'll hear from Nandita Hazarika, who I had the pleasure of working with for many years in Assam in Northeast India, and about her experience of how you get communities to take on the ownership of managing elephant conflict. So without further deliberations, I think we should go straight into our first presentation. Just to say quickly before we do that, as I mentioned, please do throw in your questions, comments, and we are recording this because people have found it a very useful resource for watching again later. And also use the chat to say where you are joining us from. I just saw a comment there. That would be very nice to hear as well. So do engage via those forums. Okay, can we hand over to Lovemore and his slides and hear from you? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex, for the opportunity, and good afternoon to everyone. In Zimbabwe, it's afternoon. It could be morning in other places and at night in other places as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Just briefly, my name is Dr. Lovemore Sibanda. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I work on lions and managing human-lion conflict in northwestern Zimbabwe. Without wasting much of your time, I'll drive straight through to my presentation. Now, it's not news to most of us that lion populations have suffered massive population declines over the last 4 or 5 decades. And not only that, but also their range has been severely reduced by almost 80% over the past century or so. And as a result, lions are classified as vulnerable in the IUCN species red list. So for those who don't know, lions don't exist throughout Africa. There are certain habitats where you only find lions. And one of that particular habitat is the Khaza Okavango Zambezi Trans-Frontier Conservation Area, the area highlighted by this green circle. This is one of the last population strongholds for lions, and it covers 5 different countries: Angola, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, and Angola. The causes of lion population decline are very well understood, and these include, but not limited to, habitat fragmentation, bushmeat poaching, and conflict with humans over livestock. But again, we are very much lucky as the Wild Trans-Kalahari Predator Program, because over the past 20 or so years, we have been working in this area, particularly in Zimbabwe and some parts of Botswana, to try and understand the ecology of the conflict in this sort of key lion habitat area. And from our research, it shows that we have a clear picture of what's happening on the ground. We know, for example, that lion problems with lions peaks during the wet months of the year when livestock are driven or headed away from people's houses closer to the protected area. And this is in this publication in case anyone wants to check it out. If you check this particular publication, you will notice that we show clearly that in 3 of the areas that we work in, a lot of the livestock gets killed outside when it's not brought home at night. Usually people bring in their livestock at night, but sometimes they don't. They have their particular reasons. It's when they're not brought home at night when they get vulnerable and get attacked by lions. We had massive amounts of knowledge, and with that knowledge, we decided to set up a community-based human-lion conflict intervention program known as the Long-Shields Lion Guardian Program. But later on, we've changed the name, or we'll also like to be known as the Long-Shields Community Guardian Program. Part of this program involves selecting influential men and women in the community, exemplary leaders, employing them to be guardians, and then taking a leadership role and motivating the rest of the community to emulate their good behavior. Now, the aim of this intervention or this intervention program or this community-based international intervention program is to not only protect livestock, but it's also to protect both lions and livestock. I underline the word both because it matters for us researchers. Lions do matter, but also humans. That's why I underline the word both there. How do they do this? So these young men and women, for example, the youngest of my team is about 21 years old, Titus, and the oldest is about 70 years old, Albert. But age is not a prime factor in this particular intervention because we had some important lessons to learn from people like Albert, who had been on Earth for almost 70 years. But at the same time, you want your energetic guys to be running around and chasing lions, and that's the reason why we went up for young guys like Titus, who I mentioned earlier, to say they were about 21. So it's not only women, we also employ men as well, or other vice versa, because we believe that women can also play a very pivotal role in lion conservation. And how do these community guardians protect lions and livestock? So they chase lions when the lions come out of the park using a vuvuzela, as you can see on that picture there. Not only that, but we also try and engage the local communities into emulating their good behaviors. In terms of livestock that are not brought home at night, that end up being killed by lions, our role is to try and assist the community to recover those stray or missing livestock. Again, every day we wake up in the morning to try and find out if there are lions in the area. Although we can collar lions and monitor their movement, we're limited in terms of how many we can collar. Hence, the skill of tracking by guardians is still very important for this particular program. But again, something to highlight, something that I'm really keen to pick your brains on is this particular intervention is not 100% new, it's not brand new. 100 or so years ago, the local people from these areas in northwestern Zimbabwe, known as the Ndebele or the people of the Long-Shield, that's where we derive our name, used to coexist peacefully with predators such as lions. This knowledge was passed on from generation to generation. For example, in this particular case, the person you are seeing in this picture is my good friend Albert Mhofu, one of my oldest guys, who's about 70 years old. Albert, in all his 70 years, has lived in Cholocho. He's never lost any single cow or goat to a lion or a hyena. We start to ask ourselves, what is it that Albert knows and not everyone else? Because lions come to his community every time Albert and his livestock are safe. These are the same people that we wanted to work with. This is the same foundation that we built this program. We wanted people like Albert, who had the technical and also the indigenous knowledge from his grandfather or great-grandfather, who knew how to chase and avoid problems with lions, to come and teach his community on how to do it properly and safely again. This is a picture of Albert, and this is his livestock enclosure. This is where he puts his livestock at night. And a neighbor possibly seeing and having a look at what Albert is doing. That's exactly what we want. We want people like Albert to lead by example and show others how it's done. And since we've been doing it, we started this project in 2018. I was very instrumental in setting it up. And again, when I did my PhD was aimed at evaluating the effectiveness of this particular intervention. The big question, or the key question, is, has this intervention been effective? Well, we've collected data for the past 13 years, and from the data we've analyzed and written papers and written up the results. For example, if you read this first publication, we will note that people's attitudes towards lions, though still in the negative, have shifted slightly in the positive direction. This means communities that are part of this particular program, their attitudes have changed in a positive direction, but not people in the controlled experiment, people who did not receive this particular intervention. If you read again this particular publication by me as well, you'll see, or you'll note that there's been a 50% reduction in livestock losses to lions. And not only that, there's also a similar effect, 50% reduction in lion killing by retaliatory lion killing by livestock farmers in most of these areas that we work in. And we think this is because we've shown in this that hazing lions, for example, one of the key interventions that we use, it seems to be very effective in mitigating conflict between humans and lions. Although we are very mindful that lions are very clever, with time, these lions will become habituated. We might need to think down, digging deep again in our thoughts and find a very clever way to scare them off the communities. But so far, blowing in vuvuzela seems to be working like magic. Now, these are the three key points that I wanted to highlight. Of course, I'm pressed for time, but I would love to discuss this even more. But one of the three main key pillars that I think have been instrumental in the success of our project is because we've involved communities from day one. When we had this whole idea, even though it was not totally new, we went to the communities and asked them first if they were really interested in it. We've been collecting data, and communities folks, they've been consulted from day one. So we had a buy-in from the communities from day one. The second point, I think, which is very important, is when we're selecting guardians, we did not just choose anyone. We asked the communities to give us names of people who were very influential and people, again, who were very much respected in the communities. And this is exactly what they did. Again, I've mentioned this before, but no harm in mentioning it again for the last time, that the long shows concept was not totally new. So it was not a new idea brought elsewhere to be tried on into these particular communities. It was an ancient idea that these people used, but we've just tweaked it a bit, improved it for significant results. So these are the three main pillars that I think were very important and are still very important in contributing to the total success of the Long Shows Community Garden Program. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll come to the end of my presentation. I wish I had more than 10 minutes to tell you more about it, but for now, I'll end here. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Lovemore. That was brief but excellent, and it really gave us a little bit of a snapshot insight into your fantastic project. And actually, I think we would all love to hear a lot more. But maybe we will have time for some bit more questions there. And it was super useful how you pulled out the three kind of pillars at the end. I want to quickly, so that we do stick to time, check if we have quick questions now. There's time at the end as well. But we do have one question from Brandon Anthony, who says, great presentation, Lovemore. You mentioned that you employ community members as part of the project. Where does the funding come from and how sustainable is that? And so I think that's a question sometimes that has been asked about, how do you make this financially sustainable?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't do a lot of fundraising for this particular program. All the credit goes to Andy Loveridge, who's the director for the Trans-Kalahari program. And he has, when this particular intervention, I should have mentioned this from the start, was in collaboration with Panthera. And a lot of the funding that we've received was from Panthera, from the WildCRU. And Andy has been very good at raising funding for this particular program. He has certain organizations, both individuals and organizations, donating money towards this program. in terms of sustainability, we're thinking a lot more about it. We envisage that one day when people see that lions are no longer a problem and they're having cows more often, they can see the need to say as a community, because in these particular areas we've got the campfire program and people are getting some benefit from campfire, benefit in quotes, and that money can be used to sustain this particular program. I think our overall idea, though sustainability is an important question, but we want to demonstrate that this perfect example works. And if it works, we want the local community to take it up themselves, either take it to the campfire board or whoever, and take it up as an example that has worked for them and continue to improve their livelihoods. I don't know if I answered that question, but I'll try also and type an answer in the Q&A session.
You answered it very well, thank you. And we're getting quite a lot more questions in. So what I'm gonna do is just pick one more and then please, and we'll come back to collective, because actually what I suspect is some of these questions will apply to all three of our examples, because there's some interesting parallel challenges. But one more quick question from Harrison Carter is, you mentioned active engagement with locals as a key pillar. What's your, I'm paraphrasing a little bit quickly, what's your lesson on how you achieve this? So in terms of how do you turn that negativity into active engagement? What was the any kind of key advice from that?
So yes, I think one of the key things, again, not mentioned in this presentation, but could have contributed, was that I'm a local person. I speak a local language, and whenever people speak to me in anger, we're in the same frequency because we speak the same language. And one key thing, again, we've been honest with these communities. We did not promise them compensation. I see in the chat section, there was someone asking about compensation. We don't offer compensation, us as the TKPP, and also currently the government is not offering any compensation for people's losses. And we've been upfront, we've been very honest with them from day one. And we've been clear that we want to try, we don't know what the problem is, but we can collect information and help these people to try and get them to a certain stage. It's really hard working with people where attitudes are very negative, because those attitudes are not directly correlated with behaviors, but they're really important because they can affect and how well an intervention can be adapted by communities or not. So another thing that we've used is we've worked closely with the traditional leaders, and very respectfully, we took things nice and slow. We didn't hurry things. We were not urgent. Again, our donors, Panthera, they were very kind to us. They offered us long-term funding. And again, one of the things is because to tell this whole story is because we've had enough funding from different organizations, baseline and also data that we use to evaluate. So these are kind of factors that one or the other may have worked to our advantage.
Super, thanks so much, Lovemore. There are more questions, but we're noting these down. They're not getting lost, your questions. We'll come to them at the end when we have all three and several other people joining in for a wider discussion across case studies. We're gonna move on. Thank you, Lovemore. I'm gonna invite Mayukh Chatterjee to join us now and give us your presentation. Over to you, Mayukh.
Thank you, Alex. I'm just going to share my screen. Is that visible? All right. Yeah, right. So a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone over here. And thank you, Alex and James, for inviting me to talk about this project. The Terai Tiger Project, which is basically implemented by the Wildlife Trust of India, and I've been integrally involved with the development and implementation of this project through my time with Wildlife Trust of India for a long time, and now with Chester Zoo, where I oversee the implementation of this project, and of course with long-term support from US Fish and Wildlife, which is absolutely essential, and a bit from Chester Zoo as well. The project basically, although it's called the Terai Tiger Project, it lays equal emphasis on leopards as well. So essentially, the two big cats that are found in this landscape. Now, the project location is based in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh in India. And as you can see from the map, how fragmented the landscape, the tiger habitat is. Basically, these are two tiger reserves in the state, the Pilibhit and the Dudhwa Tiger Reserve. And you can see by this map how extensively fragmented the forest patches are. And the remaining area around these patches comprised of very dense human population. So if you can see the little dots in this second map, are basically human habitations, and the initial count within the bounds of this polygon stands somewhere around 12,000 human settlements. And the rest of the area is basically swaths of agricultural fields. So it's a huge landscape, somewhere of the order of 4,000, 5,000 square kilometers, and a huge number of villages, many villages situated very remotely with poor access, poor roads, and therefore it's difficult to get to a lot of these villages. Now, what is also important to understand in this landscape is majority of the population that resides in this landscape are migrant, and this has been well documented. Although there are some indigenous communities like the Tharus who are strewn around, but largely there are a very recent migrant population post-independence of the country. Consequently, what we see is a very low level of traditional knowledge regarding animals, wildlife in this population. And as I said, it's the whole human habitation strewn across swaths of agricultural fields, which is predominantly sugarcane. Of course, there's also paddy and mustard, but the sugarcane is interesting because it's a tall crop and therefore it provides refuge for wildlife. It's very reminiscent of the natural vegetation of the Terai, which has tall and short grasslands. And there's just a tiny video to show you how, an ungulate of formidable stature, the black buck, can quickly disappear into a swath of sugarcane. Now, it's not just the black buck, but there are a number of other prey species that sort of thrive in these sugarcane fields. And these sugarcane fields are also worked by humans. Consequently, what you see are human casualties. On an average, taken from over a decade-long period of data collection, we've seen about 7 to 8 cases every year. Sometimes these fluctuate quite a bit, so you also have they can go up to 20 cases a year sometimes. But what is very important to understand is, from our analysis, majority of these cases, over 80% of these cases, are accidental. What I mean by that is often they would be people crouching on the ground would be mistaken for prey species by young tigers dispersing out of the parks, or people would be people would chance upon a resting animal and then get attacked in self-defense. So majority of these encounters, negative encounters, are accidental. And of course, we also have a lot of livestock losses in this region, of the order of 400, 500 on an average each year. And consequently, big cats are killed in retaliation. 1 to 2 big cats killed these are the numbers which we can link with actual conflict situations and retaliation resulting out of it. But of course, number of tigers and leopards are also found entangled in snares, some of them poisoned, some of them floating down a river. And many of these would be a consequence of retaliatory action due to conflicts. But of course, it's hard to pin them to that. But roughly about 1 to 2 or 3 individuals are directly killed as a result of retaliation. And many of these individuals are young males who are dispersing out. Now, the project itself began in 2008-9, and we started with our classical approach of providing the forest department veterinary assistance to manage human-wildlife conflict, specifically pertaining to the big cats on the ground. Now, this mode we soon realized was very reactionary, where the team was just helping the forest department address a conflict situation by trying to remove the animal from there. And apart from being reactionary, what we also realized, it was probably setting a wrong trend, where we were basically telling people that this was the only way that a conflict situation with a big cat, a tiger or a leopard could be resolved. And so we began talking to people on the ground. Over 2 years of community consultations with villagers who were facing conflict with the big cat species, led to identifying certain individuals who didn't know what to do, but were very willing to sort of help people and wildlife on the long run, but did not have a direction as to which direction to go into. During this time, we also realized that talking to people, that the problem in their minds was an external problem, and it was not a problem that they saw as sort of an occupational hazard because they were living near the forest. It was something to do with the forest department, which was an external agency, which was more concerned with just the wildlife, and therefore the wildlife was also externalized. And that is something that we realized was detrimental on the long run, because if people did not have an ownership to the problem and therefore the solutions, it wouldn't go anywhere on the long run. And so through these community consultations, we started picking up people, a lot like what Lovemore was talking about, influential people in different villages. They could be teachers, some of them are village headmen themselves. There are influential women in the teams that we have formed now. So all of these handpicked people were eventually trained, and they actually continually trained over the years in terms of various aspects of the project, whether it's tracking animals or management of people or just spreading awareness. And so this entire set of consultation and handpicking local stewards, gradually shifted the project's approach into a different direction altogether, which was more proactive than reactive, and has community response as a mechanism integrated at its core. Now, what does that mean really? So the first thing what we did was we had the mobile veterinary service, the veterinarian and the vehicle and the tranquilizing and medical equipment that she or he had. We revamped that completely into a larger set of skills packed into it, that of a sociologist, a wildlife biologist, and a veterinarian. The reason we did it is because over the 2-3 years that the veterinarian was working, we realized the veterinarian was doing everything related to these other skill sets. The person had to deal with local communities, the person had to deal with media, the person was working with the forest department, liaising with them, tracking animals, doing all of it, and that was not feasible on the long run. And therefore, these additional skill sets we thought were required, and therefore they were put in, along with, of course, the plethora of equipment that the team might require to address any kind of situation on the ground. Along with this change in structure, what we also did was we changed the modus operandi of the whole team. Initially, it was to go into a situation and try to rescue the animal, but then it changed. The first thing that the team tries to do is reduce tension, help the people, calm them down, and then at the same time, the wildlife biologist starts identifying the animal, tries to locate it, figure out what the situation is, and then, if possible, try to allow safe passage. Over the course of time, we had learned a majority of the cases were boiling out of proportions because, obviously when an animal is spotted, you will have crowds amass there very quickly. They will encircle the animal is unable to go. Often they will try to mob it, and it sort of aggravates and boils out of proportions. So if that aspect can be sort of controlled and the animal allowed to go in majority of the cases which allows for it, conflict is just resolved in a very cheap and efficient manner. And of course, at the same time, cautioning, sensitizing. Some conflict situations with leopards and tigers can be very prolonged. It can go on for sometimes weeks, sometimes months, and it's very essential to take information back to the people and caution them about things they shouldn't do, areas they should avoid, sensitizing them about safe behaviors and unsafe practices in order to minimize inadvertent negative encounters. And of course, the team is also geared to capture the animal when it's absolutely necessary. So they still assist the forest department in capturing and relocating animals when required, if at all required. But the more important thing that we did on the ground along with this was we set up this local stewardship network across this landscape. So we have about 100 local village volunteers, all handpicked over a long period of time. Sometimes it's taken 3 years, 4 years for us to figure out if the person seems to be the right fit to undertake different roles here. And unlike what Lovemore was saying, we do not pay these volunteers. It's a completely voluntary role. The only payment sort of they get of sorts is in equipment and in terms of training, capacity building. And of course, their association in this work sort of gives them a stronger and higher standing in their respective communities itself. And they're also given some basic equipment to undertake the different roles that they opt for. And different people undertake different roles. Pretty much all primary response team members are required to relay information swiftly. As I said before, this is a large landscape, so getting information on time and then responding swiftly was a major issue initially. And therefore, having information percolate in quickly so that the rapid response team and the forest department can act faster was absolutely crucial. Along with that, training them to manage crowds. Many of them, as I said, are who's who in their communities. There are people with good standing, and when they speak, people listen. The villagers listen. So it's very easy. It's much more easy for them to sort of manage crowds. And therefore, they were given that role as well. Of course, this is completely, again, even the roles are voluntary. So if some person is fit for doing something and not the others, it's completely up to them what they want to do. So there are people who are very, very vocal about and very active in managing crowds, some are not. If the situation provides for, they're also trained to rescue victims, provide first aid care. They're given first aid trainings repeatedly. Again, people who opt and who are willing to sort of undertake that training. And of course, if without external help, the situation provides for, if they can provide the animal safe passage, if they can allow it to go, they try to do that as well. Cautioning and sensitizing local villagers during conflict situations, even in conjunction with the rapid response team. Very often primary response team members will spread out, travel to different villages with posters, with other paraphernalia, talking to them about things they shouldn't do, what the situation is, so on and so forth. And of course, on the long run, which is more recent, we've been trying to train some of the PRT members who are interested in it to also help local villages in filing of relief claims provided by the Forest Department and some organizations like WWF. And on a larger note, also people who are interested, sort of cater into providing long-term education, especially to the youth, and spreading awareness in the communities. Now, what has all of that resulted in? I must say beforehand, this project is, although it's began in 2008-9 and the sort of overhaul happened in 2014 onwards, it is still in its infancy and we're only seeing signs of success. Now, over the last 4 or 5 years, what our tally says is the rapid response team has been able to address a large proportion of cases that they attend by not capturing the animal, by providing the animal safe passage, and of course ensuring that there are no other untoward incidents. So if you see this graph, the checkered squares are the proportion of cases handled by them and resolved by them by providing safe passage. There's still a certain proportion of animals that require to be captured. You might have a leopard that's fallen into a well, or trapped in a situation where they just need to be rescued. So for both leopards and tigers, leopards on the right side and tigers on the left, you'll see a very high proportion is being handled by providing safe passage. There are also certain cases where we are not able to do anything, like the black bar here, where the RRT had to just leave from there because the situation got out of hand. People got really aggressive. But the idea is that over time, if we can keep increasing this, the proportion of cases that are handled with minimal intervention, we can hopefully set a trend and in this landscape that can carry on for posterity. And this is not done just by the rapid response team. What is absolutely crucial to achieve that is the role undertaken by the primary response team, the village volunteers on the ground. So as you can see, a huge number of cases on average per year are being relayed very swiftly. So this is logged by the team regularly. And so we know the kind of information that comes in, at what time it comes in, and the response time of the rapid response team. Therefore, a substantial number of cases, primary response team members are also engaging in monitoring the animals, patrolling villages, managing crowds, providing safe passage. In some cases, primary response team members have acted independent of any kind of external effort and just called back to say that, okay, we've rescued the victim, the leopard's gone back into the forest, it's all fine. They've also been actively engaged in awareness activities, conducting meetings in villages independently, which is what the graph on the top shows. And also in many cases now they've started providing first aid to victims who have been, who've chanced upon an animal and have got injured and need medical assistance. Now that contribution has really led to the rapid response team being able to address situations more swiftly, and of course with minimal intervention resolve it as well. And doing simple things on the ground sometimes really works. So over time we realized, like, how do you manage crowds? A simple thing, you develop the capacity of the local police department, and you do simple things on the ground, like putting up psychological barriers like caution tapes around a conflict zone. We found these kind of interventions to be like really successful. And gradually what is happening is these local stewards have started taking up these practices on their own. And that, I think, if this graph on the top can go up, the bars can go up, is what the project is aiming for going forward from here. Now I want to leave you guys with this odd picture here of this barren shaven agricultural field with that one tuft of sugarcane in the middle. The reason is because this is a case that the team handled along with the primary response team members just earlier this year, wherein a leopardess had littered cubs here and ended up, attacking two of the harvesters who were trying to cut that patch down, obviously defending her cubs and herself. But people were up in arms trying to set fire to this patch, thanks to the primary response team and the rapid response team members who went in, negotiated. It was days of negotiation until the owner of the field said, okay, fine, I'm going to let this patch stand. And then more villagers came in and, catered their support, saying that, we would want to allow this leopard to leave with the cubs. Those are the cubs. And finally, over the next course of a week or two, the female leopard was able to come and take all the 5 cubs back out from there onto another sugarcane patch, and then from there onto the edge of the forest. And that entire thing was a fantastic case study, which again was taken back by the team to the local people to say, hey, this, you can resolve cases in a very simple way rather than aggravating it and, killing or injuring the leopard and yourselves in the process. And without doing any of that, you can just simply resolve cases, but just by standing back and letting the animal do its thing. But of course, this ride has not been very easy. It's been very challenging. One of the major challenges, of course, has been to get people on board, training them and to ensure that they are undertaking various roles that they've sort of agreed to. But the bigger challenge, I think, has been to be associated longitudinally with them, to have that longitudinal sustainable effort by the team on the ground, primarily because of funding. Because you have a fund for 3 years and then there's a gap, and then you're trying to run for funds. And thanks to big funders like the US Fish and Wildlife Services, Chesapeake, this effort has been sustained for quite a long time now, and hopefully we will be able to sustain it for the next 5-10 years at least, until things get better from here. Another issue the challenge that we've seen is spatially conflict hotspots can shift over time. Earlier on, we had certain PRT members in certain regions who have sort of not been experiencing conflicts anymore in and around the villages. And so therefore, this is something that we've learned to sort of now account for in our planning, and therefore build in roles for many of these members, which they can undertake even if that hotspot goes cold over time. And of course, the largest challenge has been, there are a host of behaviors and practices that local people indulge in here that predisposes them to negative encounters with big cat species like the tigers and the leopards. And things like, harvesting sugarcane singly, going into the forest to collect resources, free, unsupervised grazing by the forest, open defecation. All of these are practices and behaviors that need to change in order to, this basically makes them really vulnerable to chancing upon animals mistaking them for prey and attacking. And that needs to change over time. And bringing about that mass scale behavior change is a huge challenge. But going forward, the project has now developed, a strategy to try and address that at a smaller scale, and then see how we can go from there. But this is a major challenge in this landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mayukh, for again capturing this enormous amount of work in a very short time. It's super interesting to get that first insight into the work you've done there and the principles of how you make a community-based response team function. We've got lots of questions coming in, and I'm noticing that a lot of these questions are applicable across case studies. And so what I'd actually like to do with those questions, if it's okay with the audience, is to take them into the end discussion, because it would be really interesting to hear across the board. These are questions around how do you make it financially sustainable? How do you deal, how do you reconcile the fact that community engagement takes time, but often we have quite severe crisis situations that have to be handled immediately, and that tension, how is that reconciled? So those are super interesting questions, plus several others. We'll come back to them. I might throw one very, very quick one at you, with Mayukh, just specific to your project, which is what sort of proportion of people from the communities tend to get involved actively in these response teams?
Okay, thank you, Alex. It's relatively very small proportion, so it would just be maybe 1 or 2 people per village. And as I said, like, there are a huge number of human settlements, so there's clearly need for more. As of now, we've been able to recruit about 100 representatives from different villages, but there's clearly need for more. And now we've started thinking as to how to make it sort of sustainable. And it's not just the project team sort of handpicking, it's also like the existing primary response team members who are veterans can go ahead and then start sort of picking more members and sort of training them over time. Because, I mean, alongside the expansion, we need to think about sustainability as well, because it's near to impossible, for an external agency to keep working on the ground forever.
Yes, again, those are lessons that we find across the board. Thanks so much, Mayukh, and sorry for cutting us short there, but I would really like to hear from Nandita, our final speaker, who is going to share your presentation. And Nandita founded the Asamhati project a long time ago, which focuses on elephant issues in Northeast India. So over to you, Nandita.
Yeah, good afternoon and good evening to everybody. And thank you, FAO, Rodina, and Alex at the HWCT and James for inviting me to this seminar. So from carnivores, we go to elephants. Can you just give me a second? I'll just share the presentation. Share screen. Yeah, just a minute, please. But meanwhile, let me just, can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, here we are. Can everybody see is it visible?
Perfect.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So going to what Alex said, today I'm going to share some of the experiences which of running a project on human-elephant conflict in Assam. And this goes way back to 2005 when we at Ecosystems India, it's a small NGO based in Assam in Northeast India, partnered with Chester Zoo to start a community-based program on mitigating human-elephant conflict in Assam. And because Assam is one of the hotspots for conflict, and this has been, so this warranted some kind of action, and Chester Zoo has in its mandate to support and fund projects which deals with this issue. So the conflict issue in Assam has a bit of a history. It came into limelight only in the mid-90s. And it's not that the elephants were not there, or it was just that they were not visible and not many conflict situations had risen. But by the late 90s, this situation had snowballed, and you had some districts in Assam which suffered very severely from this problem. But over time, while we were executing the project, in the next decade after that, so between 2005 up to 2015, almost the entire state right now, almost 80% of the districts are suffering from this issue. So when we started the program, we decided to just work in 2 districts. In contrast to other organizations which are already working in Assam on this conflict issues, they were much larger, much bigger, and working at the landscape level. So the Assam Hathi project started to work at a much, smaller scale, at the micro level, at the village level. We thought that working with the communities, because what we observed was that this issue involved directly the communities. It affected their livelihoods, affected their health, and just about all aspects of their lives. So for us, we thought it was a good idea to start at the bottom and go up and see how we could actually help the communities to live alongside with this, with the elephants. So for us, this was a new initiative where we would want to work with the community. And it was not that there were other NGOs working, they were working, but the community in general, at least the 2 districts which we selected, had their experiences were not so good. So they were a bit, hesitant and antagonistic towards agencies, whether internal or external, to come and work with them. So the areas which we plan to work, you can see the general landscape. So it's agriculture economy with plantations, mostly tea plantations. And like all other, conflict scenarios and landscapes, the drivers of conflict here obviously were fragmentation of the forest land, encroachment, and the destruction of the traditional elephant corridors. So the Assam Hathi project started in end of 2004, but from 2005 onwards, we were able to execute and plan our activities. So the entire focus was on community outreach, although we did have a component of research, but the main focus was on community outreach, that how do you help the villagers? So one of our approaches was not to tell the villagers, because since they were already so antagonistic about, the animals. So we decided that we would tell them that it is not for the conservation of the elephants, but we would like to help the community to overcome their problems. So having said that, the moot idea was that we need to build the capacities of the community. How do you work with the communities when the community is already in pain, in conflict, and unwilling to accept the situation? So very often what happens is that all civil societies or NGOs, like we have, these are the major agencies which work in India on conservation programs other than the government and academic and research institutes, is that NGOs we often see ourselves very often as the messiahs, messiahs to deliver the community or somebody from some sort of problem. So in this case, it's the conflict issue, the human-elephant conflict. So very often also what happens is a lot of us, when I say us, I mean the NGO fraternity, we introduce a lot of, many interventions which can, range from, giving them incentives, financial incentives. It could be training programs, it could be workshops, or, livelihood programs. So many of us sometimes stop halfway. We do some training programs, or we hold, do environmental education, awareness trainings, we work, but we stop halfway. So we never reach the stage where we have to empower the community, so that when the external agency moves away or exits the scenario, will they be able to then be confident enough to cope up with the situation? So the Assam Hathi project, in that sense, tried to move away from the welfare mode, where you just go and give things to the community because you want to do good, to empowering them. So our main focus then was, how do you then empower these communities, which means that first you need to identify, what they want, what they need, and then help them to build those capacities so they can face the situation better. So our capacity building started actually right from the beginning, when we started to select the villages itself. How did we go about it? So we had consultations with the district administration, with the forest department, and with other NGOs who were already working to identify the districts or the areas where this situation was out of control or was likely to snowball in future. So in the end, we selected 2 districts, one which was already under severe pressure, and one, which was control, and one which may suffer from, if precautionary measures were not taken, then it could snowball into a much larger, a problem in future. So we shortlisted the villages, and then we went to all of them and we spoke to them, and we told them what was the purpose of our project and what we intended to do. And we gave all these villages a month's time, to decide. We did not want to go and impose ourselves on the areas where we wanted to work. So after a month, we went back to these villages and asked them for their consent. And we actually had a written agreement with the villages we wanted to work with, which said that they would, extend cooperation. But we did not impress upon them or force them or coerce them into, any sort of financial co-funding, because we knew that that was not possible. So after the selection of the villages, we started a planning process, and the whole idea was we tried to be very inclusive, include everybody in it, so that instead of the standard, as they say in the economic terms, the supply side, scenario, we wanted to work on the demand side, looking at what people wanted and then working with them to solve the problem. So even the staff, our field teams whom we selected, were all local. As Mayukh and as Lovemore had also mentioned in the presentations, that it's very essential and pertinent to get local people, because they add to the knowledge, and plus they empathize, they know what, is happening on the ground, and they can contribute to it. So all our field staff were local, and we did not look for people, because it was largely a community-based program. We did not look for people with higher degrees. So we had, I must tell you honestly that most of our field staff, the highest level of education was graduation or undergraduation, as they call it. And our volunteers, they came from all sections of the society. So we didn't use the word volunteers, but we had something called a network of monitors who would provide the information, of HEC incidences happening. And this was the village tailor, a schoolmaster, or a farmer, or a daily wage laborer. So we had this whole a gamut of, a medley of people from different backgrounds but who empathized and who genuinely wanted to help to alleviate the situation. So initially the team members, so when we talk of capacities, I also want to say that the capacities were done at different level. It was not just, helping the communities or the villagers or the beneficiaries or the people who were affected. So we were also talking of building the capacity of our own field staff so they could do the job better, they could understand better, and then maybe at a later stage when we exited the project area, they could help the villagers to go ahead, the community, and carry on the good work. So the field staff was initially untrained. They had no knowledge of, or the use of many devices, including computers. I mean, we take for granted today the use of laptops and other equipment because many of us come from privileged backgrounds. But the field staff at the village level, so thanks to the project, we were able to provide most of the equipment which was required, such as laptops, GPS. So over time, they also learned how to use this, and they also disseminated this knowledge among the volunteers. And I must say that, and this has really helped in the long run. It's been over 15 years now since the project has been in operation. And the knowledge and the technical, especially the technical education which they have had has really helped. So the second thing was that we did not, as I said, impose things on the community. The community was called, regular meetings were held, and open discussions had taken place where people shared their views as to how they wanted the project to go through or the activities to happen. And one thing we made sure was that whatever interventions the project had planned, it would be under a co-financing mode. Nothing would be given free because we wanted to create a sense of ownership and stewardship in the community. So very often projects fail or the intended results do not come because the incentives are given free in the sense that they're just doled out as subsidies or as support. For example, I'll just give you a small example of electric fences, the solar fences, which the forest department has put up in Assam, and the ones we gave. This is not to, I'm not trying to tom-tom what we have done, but just to highlight that the fences which the department gave soon became non-functional and, after putting very heavy investment. Whereas the ones which we had installed were small, in terms of scale, they were less than 1 kilometer or less than 5 kilometers. But there was a provision for maintenance in them. The ones which were set up by the forest department had no provision for maintenance. And because there was no co-financing in the sense that the villagers or the beneficiaries had no contribution to make. So they never had a sense of ownership and they did not treat that system as their own. So, but this helped in our case because we did not demand financial contribution because we knew that they were not in a position to give that kind of, give those kind of inputs, financial inputs. So in kind, we requested for contribution, and that came in form of labor, it came in the form of the wooden poles, and it came in form of maintenance. So a thing like solar fencing, which of course for an elephant is only a psychological barrier, as long as you're able to, plan them well. The community was fiercely possessive about this. In fact, in many of the villages, they even, set out a set of rules and guidelines, and there were penalties if certain households did not, comply with the rules. So,
Nandita.
So this is just, yes, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think we could, because we're running a little short of time and you're going into wonderful detail, which I would love to bring the whole panel into.
Yeah.
Would we
Oh,
be
yes.
able
So
to
some of this,
conclusion?
oh,
Thank
sure.
you.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just go ahead. So quickly, just to say that we also, partnered with other partner organizations and institutes to fill the gap where the project lacked skills. Then the second thing, the last thing was that we also in process of doing all this, we also build our own capacities. The project management also build their own capacities. So this is just quickly to show you how our volunteers and our field staff were trained, and then the community, how they contributed. And we learned a lot from other countries. Lovemore, I would say that we learned about chili deterrence from Africa, early warning systems from Sri Lanka. We did not want to, what we did not want was to reinvent the wheel. So we learned from the lessons and from the projects which are happening in the rest of the world, and then we just innovated. And so in 2005, we just started from 7 villages in 2 districts, and by 2015, we were able to work in 160 villages across 7 districts. But what I would, quickly come to the lessons learned was that where we had greater success was where the communities were marginalized and homogeneous, and because the interventions which we had planned were all low tech and low cost, so that the people could, there was no financial burden on the community. And but I just want to bring out, highlight 2 main challenges, is that many of us who are working on conflict, projects, related projects, we are only firefighting at the moment. At least that's what our project was doing. Most of us, I would say 99% of us are firefighting. So we need to look beyond that. We need to look beyond firefighting and look for long-term measures, and community conservation projects have a long gestation period. So that is the other challenge. So unless, this is a lesson for both donors as well as, the recipients, is that unless some donor, if donors can commit, make a commitment for 10 years plus, then only does it make sense for an agency or for an NGO to take up community conservation projects. Because otherwise we are completely on tenterhooks all the time, and you're only thinking, for every 3 years or every 5 years or every, short intervals. And that does not augur well for the sustainability of projects. So someone had talked about sustainability. So that's where it is. So if people are, planning to do community conservation programs, so this is something which they really need to look into. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nandita. And so sorry for hurrying you along.
No, that's okay.
Because I know what a deep wealth of experience and insights there are from this. And it's really nice to see these recurring themes, and how you also mentioned at the end now, this tension between needing to spend a lot of time to make these things work, and yet being under pressure to have fixes quickly. And that's one of the challenges that keeps coming up. We have several questions about that also. In the interest of time, though, I want to really bring in our additional panel, because we have 3 more panelists who are members of the specialist group, who have also got an enormous wealth of experience in this field. So I'd love to introduce to you, and maybe if you can put your cameras on, Jenny Glickman, who is based at the Institute for Advanced Social Sciences in Cordoba in Spain, and has worked really specialized on human dimensions and the social sciences of human-wildlife conflict, has worked all over the world. And we have Dr. Loki Osborne, who has worked for decades in Zimbabwe, I think is possibly in the US at this moment, and has a huge amount of experience dealing with African elephants, does a huge amount of work on that, working through communities, and runs the Connected Conservation organization to help communities. And then we also have, where have we got, Kostub is still there, Kostub Sharma, based in the Kyrgyz Republic, has worked for a very long time on snow leopards and community-based solutions to snow leopard conservation, including human-wildlife conflict, of course, with snow leopards. He's with the Snow Leopard Trust, and with the Global Snow Leopard Ecosystem Protection Program, which is an alliance across all range states. And in addition to our three panelists, and Kostub, if you're there, please feel free to switch on your camera. Also the speakers, if you can be back online, because I would like to throw these questions at all six of you, if I can, because these are that sort of cross-cutting questions that we have. And also, I'm very aware that there's a hell of a lot of expertise in the audience. So we do have, we've got more questions and hands up than we can probably cover, but we'll try our best. So feel free to jump in with further questions, but also comments on your own insights or reflections. So I want to maybe start with a question that has come up. There's two that have come up several times. How about we start with the financial dilemma, where, and I'm sure that all six panelists on here right now have had this question in their minds, in their projects in the past, is how do you deal with the fact that these kinds of efforts need funding, and on the other hand, you don't want to become overly donor dependent, you want the community to invest in whatever shape or form. Do you pay people? Do you not pay people? We've seen different models here today. And so I'll open it up to any, what are your thoughts been on that over time as you've learned through your own projects? Can we, I wonder if we've heard from speakers. Well, let's go with Mayukh.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Well, I think it would greatly vary from context to context, location to location, really. In our case, we very consciously did not decide to pay the primary response team members because we did not want people vying for like a fixed salary of sorts to actually come and join the team. We wanted people who sort of felt it internally that they wanted to help in some way. Maybe they would have some bit of vested interest of theirs, like have a stronger standing in society or whatever, but somewhere inside they would feel that, okay, we need to do something and we can do something. I think we wanted people who felt that to sort of come forward and therefore join the endeavor. So that was the intention, to not actually have a payment system in place. But I guess it would vary greatly. It would also depend on the kind of intervention, because this was dealing with a response system, really. It wasn't like, it didn't have to do much with alternative livelihoods or whatever. So I think, therefore, it would vary if the intervention was different.
Thanks, Mayukh. Have any of the others got reflections on the funding dilemma or challenge?
Yes, can I jump in?
Please.
So I see it, at two levels. One is the sustainability, the existence, the very existence of the initiative or the project, which is donor driven, at least in India. I think I don't know, maybe Mayukh and Kostub and others can comment on this, but I would say that many, majority of the successful or big projects, conservation projects in India are heavily donor driven, and that too from overseas, driven, which means that we are to follow our mandate as well as the mandate of the donors also. So as I just mentioned, that community conservation projects are very long. They have long gestation period. Even to build the confidence of the community, itself takes about a year or two. And then, the rest of the activities follow. So as I'd mentioned earlier, you're talking, so if anybody is planning or wants to do, we started off not thinking, Chester Zoo had been very supportive and they had made a long-term commitment, but this may not happen with everybody. And the mandate of the donors also change over time, depending on, which species is more in focus, and very often you have certain glamorous and flagship species which take precedence. For example, carnivores always take, the tiger always takes precedence over the elephant or, other lower, mammals. So, so it depends. So if, so sustainability is one thing in terms of a regular flow of funds. So is the donor ready to commit 10 years plus Because the other problem is the impact. You do not see, it's very difficult to see the impact of community conservation projects in a short time, say let's say in 5 years. Today, if you ask me what impact have we made, it'll be very difficult. If you say that has the project has contributed to the increase of elephant population in Assam, I said, I don't know. I cannot, say. But definitely I can say yes, that the community has come forward. At least we've been successful in convincing the community that you can live alongside with elephants. They are now to some extent empowered, to take the situation in their hands and willing to take some action. Complacency is always there. It will creep in at some point, even with the community, But we are, unfortunately, all of us are very much donor driven at this point, whether domestic or, overseas. So funds is a major challenge, and also I think the impact itself. So it's important for the donors also to understand that while you can see the impact in terms of workshops or trainings given, or some livelihood, you distribute things, let's say looms, or you distribute plants, or, whatever, whichever intervention you have in mind, this tangible things. So very often the donor wants to see tangible things, but the attitudinal shift takes a long time, as Lovemore has also mentioned, in his studies. So
Yes.
that's something, I think we all need to dwell on it and find, ways how to tackle,
And
Yes, Jenny.
I can jump in there is to build on that perspective, on our experience. Yes, absolutely. Most of the times it's either donor driven and then grant to support. But I see a big difference, for example, in terms of sustainability for more the technical issues, such as maybe fences or, like monitoring like the material component, that in the cases where I've been working, most of the times we try, for example, to at the beginning, for example, for fences, to start like a micro economic business within the community. So in the yes, as you were mentioning, like maybe not completely donating, but co-sharing the cost of that, and then having something built within the local communities to the economy and the sustainability, trying to be more at a local level aspect. And so that component's totally see, but is definitely harder when there is the aspect of salaries and human component. That is where I still have the challenge in seeing in the long term for, like, and I think also when you mention it on retaining, even if they're volunteers, they can volunteer for certain aspect and they receive social norms, like power within and a better level up within the community component. But it is we need to still, in my way, still need to find a way for a more sustainable way for the social people.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm gonna ask Loki, from your experience, your reflections on this.
Thanks. I was just I just put a link to the wildlife friendly network that I was just thinking about while you were talking. That is a brilliant attempt to link projects and small income generation efforts that projects often are doing in a small way. I look to the bees and the honey projects, and it's gotten more sophisticated over the years. The predator-friendly beef, the wolf-friendly wool projects that are going on. The idea that the stories around the conflict with wildlife are so interesting. And it's one of the things that I think is one of the most valuable parts of all of this work is not to forget the fact that these stories are very evocative, and in principle, you could, using finding alternative ways, using the donor money to initially set these things up, but it's a constant problem. How do you form something that will last? And the only sustainable way to complement, say, the state-funded or donor-funded is to have income generations. And I think the points that everybody has made in these talks, which is brilliant to hear, that it's about the people. That the wildlife. And unfortunately, historically, wildlife biologists have really just focused on the wildlife, and the people have always seemed like the problem. And it seems like there's a new generation of researchers and people who are coming at it, helping these people will help the wildlife eventually. And I think that that's a more accepted point of view now. And I think I was just gonna and also, just while I have the floor, just to ask about the in Lovemore's presentation, one of the problems that Southern Africa seems to see, and I think it happens a lot of places where predators, how do you deal with the overstocking that's going on? How do you deal with the fact that there are way too many cattle in Southern Africa, for example, and often the balance is out with the way, because of the poverty and the way the social dynamics are, some of the ecological things that are happening. Why is there so much sugarcane being grown in Assam? Why, can't some of that land, the tea estates that are there, we've taken most of the land available for wildlife, and we're trying to do these sometimes not very productive agricultural systems in these areas. But anyway, I'll stop there. It's a fascinating discussion, though. Thank you all.
Thanks, Loki. There's so many angles to this. Lovemore actually had to leave us early, but he answered a lot of the questions online, some of the questions that were asked. And we only have a few minutes left. I want to see if we can come back to that question of everyone here is talking about creating community ownership, and that
Is it just me, or we all lost Alex?
I think we may have just lost Alex
Oh, there.
briefly.
Yeah,
I think I
Alex,
just
are you
dropped
back?
maybe you've had enough of us.
Okay, I don't know what I was putting the question to the panel because I'm paraphrasing several questions that came in that are similar to each other, which are about reconciling the need to do a long game with the communities, and that just simply takes time, and then actually dealing with crisis, and people want something now. Any reflections from your own experiences? I saw Kostub nodding. If you have any thoughts there, or Mayukh? Yep, go ahead, Kostub.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I must start by saying it's been such a pleasure listening to the three presenters. Almost a sense of deja vu as I heard through Lovemore, Nandita, and Mayukh, the core principles, the practices, the theory that went into it, spectacular, and it just felt so much at home that these are exactly how we've been trying to do things in the snow leopard landscape. But I'll second everyone here that in fact I'll go one step further and say that there's no exit strategy for conservation programs. We cannot plan for an exit strategy. And again, I understand the donors may have limitations there, but the key is that donors can keep changing. We've had a few projects where we've changed 4 donors over a span of 9 or 10 years, and it's one comes and goes. Sometimes they come back, but I think the key is if you can plan well enough, and if you can ride on the success, there's always an opportunity to telescope an ongoing project with an upcoming project and continue. But again, the bottom line being, which everyone has said here, without any words missed, we can't really have an exit strategy, and one must really plan for long term. Yeah, and again, I mean, it's almost like I'll be reiterating what other speakers have spoken before, making the community working with the community and not imposing a solution on them, ensuring that they are partners and not recipients. I mean, these all resonate so much with what we can call as successful conservation programs, over the long term. So, yeah, really, really a pleasure having heard the conversation. But don't really have much on at this point to add on that conversation.
Thanks so much. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and I saw that there's some hands up in the audience also. We might be able to just take one. Is Farina still there? Did you have a question? If not, David Peter has a hand up. We need to give speaking rights. There we go. That should work. Go ahead with your question, David. Can we unmute David? Maybe we could. It's working. Great.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me all? Good afternoon.
Yes.
Yeah, I am calling from Gashaka Gumti National Park here in Nigeria, in Taraba State. So I actually don't have question. It's just that I'm happy to be here, and it's quite interesting to hear the conversation from all different parts of the world, especially on conservation. And it's nice to be here, actually.
Thanks so much, David. Really great that you could join. Okay.
Thank you.
I am going to wrap this up because unfortunately we have run out of time. There are still a lot of questions, and I'm so sorry to those who asked questions that we couldn't specifically answer all of them. I noticed that there were a few more very interesting questions about costs, sharing of costs, benefits, and so on. There was also someone said, you haven't talked about microinsurance and kinds of those sorts of solutions. Well, as it happens, we are going to do another seminar like this, another webinar, where that's going to actually be the topic. So I'm going to quickly hand over to Christina to just close this and tell us a little bit about the next one. Over to you, Christina.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. And thank you so much to all participants and presenters and panelists. And it's great. So we'll start from the good news. And I think this is the short-term plan for both the specialist group and IUCN. We will be hosting the third webinar quite soon on 15th of November. We will be having the webinar on incentives and financial instruments for coexistence. So you can already start registering. I think we will have a link posted now in chat, and also we'll make sure to advertise it in social media and other internet space. So let me also maybe highlight a few more exciting news. So as Alexandra was saying, we are now conducting, I think, finishing the first phase of our great pilot study. We've published 6 case studies that I'm sure you had a chance to look online today, and we're now finalizing the last 4, 2 from Zimbabwe, 1 from Mozambique, and 1 from Kenya. I think in terms of promotion, we'll make sure that they're not only promoted through social media, but there is a couple of very important policy negotiations and international events, including their, I think, 2 big COPs of CITES and CBD, where I think I have to mention that human-wildlife conflicts and coexistence and the way it's framed now, interactions, it's very well placed in one of the targets. So it's really great to see that the international community and also the governments are really taking this very important issue seriously. And also let me finish saying that we are not concluding our work. Next year we will be publishing another 15 case studies. We're working very hard now to finalize those. And I'm sure we will continue running this very exciting and very useful webinars next year. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much to everyone from FAO.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you to our three speakers, our three panelists. Thanks for making the time to show us and summarize these reflections. There's so much more that can be discussed here, but as always, there's a shortage of time, so we will find other ways and venues to keep the discussion and keep learning from each other. Meanwhile, do feel free to check out the versions that are online of these case studies where all the details have been written up, and share those and keep in touch. So with that, thank you again very much, and take care.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alex.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.